What if the most dangerous idea in human history wasn't a weapon, a war, or a political movement? What if it was a single thought, a belief so seductive, so intoxicating, that a man decided to test it on himself? And what if that test ended in murder? This is not a story about two dead philosophers collecting dust on a library shelf. This is a story about a question that is still alive, a question that lives inside every person who has ever looked at the world and thought, there has to be more than this. Two men. Two of the most brilliant, tortured, and dangerous minds in human history. One was a novelist. One was a philosopher. They never met. They may never have even known each other existed. Yet somehow, across the fog of 19th century Europe, they arrived at the same terrifying crossroads and took violently different paths. One of them said, God is dead. Now man must become something greater. The other said, I'll show you exactly what happens when a man believes that. And he wrote it as a murder story. By the end of this video, you will understand not just what Nietzsche and Dostoevsky believed, but why those beliefs matter right now, today in your life. Because the crisis they were writing about, it never ended. It just changed its clothes. Here is the question they were both trying to answer. If God is dead, if there is no higher power, no divine law, no ultimate consequence, what stops a man from doing absolutely anything? One man answered that question in theory. Another answered it by sending a character to commit murder. And the two answers could not be more different. Before we get to the ideas, you need to understand the men. Because these were not comfortable academics writing from leather armchairs. These were broken people, suffering people, men who had stared into the darkest corners of human existence and refused to look away. Fyodor Dostoevsky suffered from epilepsy his entire life. Violent, unpredictable seizures that left him physically devastated and psychologically raw. He was arrested in his 20s, sentenced to death, led to the execution ground, and at the very last moment reprieved. That experience, standing before a firing squad believing he had seconds to live, never left him. It cracked him open in a way that could never be fully repaired. Then came Siberia. Years in a labor camp, in brutal cold, surrounded by criminals, physically broken, spiritually tested to the absolute limit. Most men would have come back from that empty. Dostoevsky came back transformed. Friedrich Nietzsche never faced a firing squad. But his suffering was its own kind of slow execution. He battled illness for most of his adult life. Blinding migraines, deteriorating eyesight, a body that seemed to be at permanent war with itself. And then, at the age of 44, something broke inside him entirely. He collapsed in the street in Turin, and for the remaining 11 years of his life he was mentally gone. Silent, unreachable. The man who had written some of the most electrifying philosophical prose in history, reduced to silence. Two men, both in agony, both writing from a place of genuine despair. And here is the detail that should stop you cold. Dostoevsky almost certainly never heard the name Nietzsche. He died in 1881, before Nietzsche's most important works had even reached their audience. But Nietzsche knew Dostoevsky. He had read him. And in The Twilight of the Idols, Nietzsche wrote that Dostoevsky was the only psychologist from whom he had anything to learn, and that discovering him was among the greatest strokes of fortune in his life. One man admired the other deeply, profoundly, gratefully. The other never knew. There is something quietly devastating about that. And it tells you everything about what kind of story this is going to be. Same era, same crisis, same searing, sleepless questions about God and man and meaning, but radically, irreconcilably different souls. Let's start with Nietzsche because his idea is the one that detonated. In 1882, Nietzsche wrote 4 words that changed the intellectual history of the Western world. God is dead. Now, before you misunderstand him, and almost everyone does, this was not a celebration. Nietzsche was not cheering. He was sounding an alarm. What he meant was this. The belief system that had held Western civilization together for over 1,000 years was collapsing. People were losing their faith. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, steadily, like a building whose foundation has been slowly hollowed out. And Nietzsche could hear it cracking before anyone else could. His warning was not "God is dead. Now party." His warning was God is dead, and we have no idea what that means for us yet. He explored this through one of the most extraordinary characters in philosophical literature, Zarathustra. Picture this. A man has spent 10 years alone on a mountain. He has thought and reflected and gathered what he calls the honey of his wisdom, deep, hard-won truth about what human beings are and what they could become. And now, overflowing with that wisdom, he descends. He wants to share it. He wants to give it away. On his way down, he meets an old hermit in the forest. The hermit had once loved humanity deeply, but humanity had disappointed him so completely that he retreated into the woods and gave his love to God instead. He warns Zarathustra, "Don't go to the people. Don't bring them gifts. Take part of their load instead. They are not ready for what you carry." Zarathustra listens. He smiles. He continues down the mountain. And when the hermit disappears into the trees, Zarathustra speaks quietly to himself. Could it be possible? This old saint has not yet heard in his forest that God is dead. Zarathustra goes to the marketplace. He stands before the crowd, and he tells them something that should have shaken the ground beneath their feet. Man is a rope tied between beast and overman, a rope over an abyss. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not an end. The crowd laughs at him. They don't have the ears for his words. This is where Nietzsche introduces the two poles of his entire philosophy. On one side, the Übermensch, the Overman, not a superhero, not a conqueror, but a human being who has the courage to face a universe with no God, no pre-given meaning, no divine safety net, and create meaning anyway. A person who overcomes themselves, who refuses the comfort of the herd, who makes of their life a living work of art. On the other side, the last man comfortable, mediocre, surrounded by safety and sameness, blinking at anyone who dares to be extraordinary. The last man doesn't suffer, but he also never truly lives. He is the pinnacle of smallness. Nietzsche's challenge to every person who has ever lived is brutally simple. Which one are you going to be? And his philosophy goes further, a more fatty. Love your fate. Not just accept what life throws at you. Love it. The suffering, the failure, the loss. Because it is all yours. Because it made you. Because to reject any part of your life is to reject yourself. It is one of the most demanding, most electrifying ideas a human being has ever proposed. And Dostoevsky looked at it and felt a chill run down his spine. Let's pause for a moment. Because if you've been watching this and feeling something you can't quite name, a strange pull, a low hum of discomfort, a sense that this is somehow about you, that is not an accident. There is something happening in this story that operates below the surface. And I want to name it. From the very first moment of this video, a question was planted in your mind and never answered. What happens when a man actually tries to live as an Übermensch? Every section since has been tightening that question like a screw. But the answer has been withheld. You feel the tension without knowing exactly why. That is a curiosity loop. And it works because the human brain cannot stand an open question. It will stay engaged until it gets resolution. There is something else happening too. Nietzsche's framework is seductive because it flatters. Somewhere in the last few minutes, you have been quietly asked a question you didn't choose to answer. Am I the Übermensch, or am I the last man? Nobody wants to be the last man. Nobody identifies with mediocrity. So the idea pulls at your ego, at your self-image, at your private belief that you are somehow different from the herd. That discomfort, that is the philosophy working on you in real time. And then there is this. Both Nietzsche and Dostoevsky were introduced to you not as geniuses first, but as suffering human beings first. A man who faced a firing squad. A man who went silent for 11 years. We were given their pain before their ideas. And that is deliberate. Because we trust broken people who kept searching for truth far more than we trust comfortable people who never had to search at all. But here is the most important thing I want you to hold on to. The most powerful move in this entire story is not a philosophical argument. It is the fact that Dostoevsky did not argue against the Übermensch. He built one. He sent him into the world. And he let reality do the arguing. Raskolnikov is the laboratory. And we are about to see what the experiment produced. Dostoevsky saw the Übermensch idea coming before Nietzsche had even fully formed it. He saw it rising in the culture around him, this new atheism, this new rationalism, this intoxicating belief that man could replace God with pure reason and emerge stronger. And instead of writing an essay arguing against it, he did something far more devastating. He wrote a character who believed it completely, and then he destroyed him. Meet Raskolnikov. He is young, brilliant, and desperately poor. A law student in St. Petersburg who can no longer afford his tuition. He lives in a coffin-sized room. He barely eats. The city presses down on him like a physical weight. But none of that is what defines him. What defines him is an idea. Raskolnikov has divided all of humanity into two categories. The first, ordinary people. Obedient, unremarkable, bound by law and morality, living and dying without leaving a mark on history. The second, extraordinary people. Napoleons, geniuses, people so far above the common herd that the normal rules simply do not apply to them. People who have the right, perhaps even the obligation, to step over conventional morality if doing so advances mankind. And Raskolnikov has decided, quietly, privately, with complete conviction. He is one of the extraordinary ones. He has a plan. There is a pawnbroker, a cruel, exploitative old woman who preys on the desperate. She is, by almost any measure, a net negative on the world. Raskolnikov has done the calculation. If she dies, her money goes to people who actually need it. The world improves. One worthless life ends. Many worthy lives are bettered. It is not murder. It is mathematics. It is the act of an Übermensch, cold, rational, above guilt. He plans it carefully. He executes it. And then everything falls apart. Not because he gets caught. Not because the plan fails logistically. But because of something Raskolnikov had not accounted for, something his entire philosophical framework had no room for himself. Within hours of the murder, he begins to unravel. Paranoia seizes him. He cannot think clearly. He cannot sleep. He drifts in and out of fever and delirium, haunted by what he has done. He looks in the mirror and does not recognize the person looking back. He had thought the act would prove something, that crossing that line would confirm his status, would demonstrate that he was indeed extraordinary, indeed above the moral law that shackled ordinary men. Instead, it revealed something he had spent his entire intellectual life refusing to see. He was not above it. He was not a Napoleon. He was not an Übermensch. He was a human being, with a conscience, with a soul that could be wounded, with an interior life that no philosophical framework could simply override. Along with the murder, Raskolnikov had also killed a part of himself. This is Dostoevsky's answer to Nietzsche, not a counter-argument, a demonstration. Man cannot be God, and the attempt to become God does not liberate, it annihilates. So here we are, two men, same abyss, and now we see exactly how differently they chose to stand in front of it. Nietzsche looks into the void, into a universe with no God, no given meaning, no divine guarantee, and he says, "Good. Now we are free. Now man can finally become what he was always capable of becoming. He can create his own values. He can love his fate. He can make of his life a work of art. He does not need illusion. He does not need faith. He needs only the courage to face reality without flinching. This is not arrogance. This is, in its own way, an extraordinary act of faith, faith in man, in human potential, in the idea that the individual, standing alone before an indifferent universe, can still choose greatness." Dostoevsky looks into the exact same void and trembles, not because he is weak, but because he understands something Nietzsche, for all his brilliance, may have underestimated. He understands what human beings actually are. His years in Siberia did not give him this understanding from a book. He lived it in flesh and cold and desperation. And what he found at the very bottom of human suffering was not the Übermensch. It was prayer. It was the desperate, inarticulate, irreducible human need for something above. Dostoevsky once wrote something so extreme, so absolute, that it stops most readers cold. He said that even if someone proved to him that truth lay outside of Christ, He would rather stay with Christ than with the truth. Read that again. This is not blind faith. This is a man who has thought harder about God than almost anyone in history, who has lived through suffering that would have broken most people entirely, and who concluded that the need for transcendence is not a weakness to be overcome. It is the most honest thing about us. For Dostoevsky, faith, the reaching toward something beyond ourselves, is not an escape from reality. It is the only thing that makes reality survivable. Without it, you do not get the Übermensch. You get Raskolnikov. But here is what this story demands you hold in tension. Nietzsche is not simply wrong. There is something in his vision that is monumental. A vigor, an unexampled courage, an epic faith in man's capacity to build and create and overcome. A refusal to hide from the truth behind comfortable mythology. A demand that we take full responsibility for our lives and our values. Dostoevsky's vision of man striving toward an unattainable ideal may be more realistic about human nature. But Nietzsche's vision of man as creator, as artist, as the architect of meaning, there is nothing quite like it in the history of human thought. They are not opposites who cancel each other out. They are two brave people standing at the same terrifying edge, one reaching upward, one reaching inward, each refusing to look away. We are not in 19th century Russia or Germany, but we are absolutely living in the world that Nietzsche and Dostoevsky were warning us about. The structures of meaning that once held civilization together, religious faith, shared moral frameworks, a collective sense of purpose, have been fracturing for over a century. And in their place, an overwhelming, dizzying freedom, the freedom to define yourself, to create your own values, to be, in theory, anything. It sounds like liberation, but look around. Look at the epidemic of purposelessness, of anxiety, of quiet desperation dressed up as lifestyle. Look at how many people are free and completely lost. Nietzsche saw this coming. So did Dostoevsky. And they each left you something. Nietzsche left you a challenge. Stop waiting for meaning to be handed to you. The universe is indifferent. God, in the traditional sense, may not be coming to save you. So become the kind of person who does not need saving. Build your values with intention. Love your fate, all of it, including the parts that broke you. Make of your life something worthy of the brief, improbable miracle that it is. Dostoevsky left you a different kind of wisdom. Know what you are. You are not a machine. You are not a calculator. You are a human being with a conscience that will not be philosophized away. The attempt to rise above your own humanity does not produce the Übermensch. It produces Raskolnikov, brilliant, isolated, and destroyed by the weight of what he thought he was above. The question is not which of them was right. The question is which of them is speaking to you right now in your actual life, in the choices you are actually facing. Are you hiding from your potential behind the comfort of the herd, becoming slowly the last man Nietzsche warned you about? Or are you reaching so far above your own humanity, so convinced of your own exceptionalism, that you have lost sight of what makes you human in the first place? Raskolnikov tried to become the Übermensch, and it broke him. But Nietzsche never said it would be easy. He said it would be the hardest thing a human being could ever attempt. He said most people would never even try. He said the ones who tried would suffer, and that the suffering was the point. The question is not whether you are capable of it. The question is whether you are brave enough to find out.